The USPSA Board of Directors released their 2021 February meeting minutes, and in that were some bombshells, and we're going to discuss those with you now, including the rules updates, as well as activity and my personal speculation on what it means for the sport, and some hot takes on some of the punditry that's going on with respect to the rule changes. So are you ready? Stand by. So first things first, what everybody wants to talk about are the rule changes, and we'll go from probably the least controversial to the most controversial. The first and foremost is raising the weight limit of single stack from 43 ounces to 45 ounces. I think that's fine. People were having to game the 9mm guns to make weight at 43 ounces, using like super thin wood grips and things like that in order to make weight. And if you fail going to like single stack nationals, like the director of National Range Officer Institute, Troy McManus, did last year, then you get bumped to open, which is kind of embarrassing. Some people like to say that they raised the weight limit just because Troy bumped to open. I've heard of a lot of people bumping to open based on their 9mm guns being too heavy. I think Troy's unfortunate bump at last year's single stack Nats probably underscores the reason you should raise the weight limit, but I don't think it was the impetus for it. I think it was probably a long time coming. And the next update was belts. The belts have changed the rules so that everybody can basically run magnets, and they can run their holsters, both magazine pouches as well as holsters, in front of their hip bones. Previously, Carry Optics, Production, and Single Stack all needed to have their holsters behind the iliac crest, but that is no longer the case. Everybody can run magnets and everybody can move it around, and I think that's fine. Critics of this change are going to say, like, oh, it's just making all the divisions kind of be the same. Well, it's making the belt required to shoot all the divisions be the same. If you really think that the game mechanics are really based around where the magazine pouches and stuff are on the belt, it's more of a nuanced change than anything. It was just an unnecessary complication. I don't think it's a big game changer due to the fact that everybody can now reload from the most practical position. And I think it kind of goes in with the next rule change, which is Appendix inside the waistband is now legal as part of that update. You can remember a couple months ago there was a big blow up with IDPA cracking down on Appendix inside the waistband. Meanwhile, USPSA, which is the sport for gamers, goes and does a mic drop while allowing all practical gear that is typically carried by serious concealed carry guys to be legal to race with in USPSA. The only thing that was potentially left out was like concealed carry type magwells. That's going to be a much bigger issue for Production and Carry Optics guns. I don't necessarily see that happening anytime soon, but if you ask me to look at my crystal ball, I think that change is coming. You can see what changes I think need to be put into the game in the Fixing USPSA videos I did. They'll be popping up in one of these corners. Check them out after this video if you like. And finally, the thing that's got all the jimmies rustled this year is the fact that flashlights, weapon-mounted lights, are now legal in all divisions. And from what I'm seeing online, the reactions basically are gauged with how far away you are from introducing new shooters to the sport as to how disastrous you think this is. The people who never ever talk to new shooters think this is the worst thing ever and will point to the fact it's just a big frame weight. And Cody Axon from the Shoot Pass podcast rightly indicates that if you illuminate a target with a super bright light, it makes your iron sights show up super clear on target. But while that is a valid concern, you can write that out in stage briefs, and I think that good match directors are going to be doing that. If you think about last year's Nationals down at Frostproof, out of 22 stages, there was one stage that would have had a benefit to having an illuminated target for iron sight divisions. It's the shoot house stage. So it's almost like having a knee pad in your bag for the random times there's a low port where you have to hit the deck with your knees super fast. It could be an ace in the hole potentially, but the circumstance is going to be so rare. More importantly, and I'll be doing a video on this with a couple different Carry Optics and Production style guns, the effect of the weapon mounted light on how they handle, that's probably the bigger thing. So holster makers everywhere are now tooling up to make weapon-mounted light holsters. In the short run, if you needed one like yesterday, then you could probably get one from T-Rex Arms. They've been making the Ragnarok with the weapon-mounted light since like forever for most of the popular guns. But back to where people's opinions come down on this. I work as a co-match director. I've been doing the new shooter brief at the USPSA match that I'm associated with for the past year or so. And I've actually lent a universal fit holster to 2 different shooters on 2 different occasions who showed up with only their weapon mounted light on their gun and didn't want to shoot their iron sight guns in open division. So I lent them a universal fit Safariland holster I keep in my trunk specifically for that occasion. And that happens pretty regularly. I've been involved in matches for the past 3 or so years now, and it happens on a pseudo-regular basis. Somebody shows up not knowing what to expect, and they've got a weapon mounted light in a holster that only accepts a gun with a weapon mounted light. Like, it's happened a double-digit amount of times in the time I've been doing new shooter briefing. So as a match director and as somebody with a YouTube channel helping people get into shooting sports, I've been telling people for a long time that, oh yeah, you just have to spend $150 to get your belt set up to play this game that we play that is by no means expensive. So the people who are most upset about this are the people who've been in the game the longest and seem to have lost sight of what it was like to be a new shooter back in the day. I can remember during the last shortage trying to scrounge and find ammo so I could play this new game I just found, and it was a big deal for me to come out of pocket about $100 for just an IDPA waistband setup, which was 2 mag pouches and a waist-mounted holster. So to just say like, well, screw new shooters, we'll just make them buy a $150 belt if they want to play our sport anyway. It's not that much money in the long run. You're right, it's not a lot of money in the long run, but it is a lot of money to somebody who's looking at getting into a new game. And it's just lowering the barrier to entry and getting new people involved in our sport. And then immediately the criticism goes to, well, these aren't going to be the people that help set up the match. You have no way of knowing that. Some of the conversations I've had with people saying like, well, the Timmies aren't going to be the ones helping out at the match. At the match that I help put on, there is at least one reformed Timmy who helps me set up stages every month on a monthly basis. They are not that uncommon, and by making our game more accessible to anybody who wants to play it is nothing but a good thing. And if you think about the effect that a weapon mounted light is going to have, and again, I'll be making a video on this, it's not going to be that pronounced on guns that are already super muzzle heavy like the X5 or the Shadow 2 or any of the Tanfo guns. Those guns are already stupid heavy at the dust cover, and by bolting another 4 ounces onto it, all you're going to do is imbalance the gun so it's going to want to wiggle more. And I've already done a video on this with weapon-mounted lights, specifically with Glocks. So I would say that the guys shooting the lightweight polymer guns, like the 29, 30-ounce guns, are likely going to be running weapon-mounted lights, but guys who are shooting the steel frame guns probably won't because it's just too much weight and it imbalances the gun so darn much. But what is most interesting to me is the activity reports that come out every March, and this year was no exception. Now, the trend up until now has been decreasing popularity amongst iron-sighted divisions, increasing popularity in red dot divisions. And as far as general activity and membership is concerned, it had been on the rise historically. Due to COVID-19, as you can imagine, when you lose 3 months of shooting, you lose a lot of activity. So the actual membership shrank last year and the amount of activity decreased. But what is significant is that Carry Optics as a division actually increased activity significantly. Who lost activity? Basically everybody else. If you look at PCC and Open, which were on a growing trend up until last year, they both lost about 15% of their activity. But if you look at both production and limited, they lost about 30% of their activity, with production losing even more. So just kind of reading between the lines, and what that data actually means is that people like shooting cheap guns, people like shooting cheap or less specialty ammo. 40 is, I guess, a specialty caliber at this point, and 9mm is kind of the standard, so everyone wants to shoot it. So then you've got Carry Optics, which is a high capacity division shooting 9mm, and it features red dot sights. And what that leaves us with is the most popular division, basically. Diving into the numbers of the limited activity, about 50% of the shooters on an activity basis are shooting 9mm. And what that means is that there is roughly as many people in limited likely shooting production guns in a high cap division as there are production shooters. So the next big argument that we're going to have, and if you follow my stuff, you know that I'm a proponent of increasing the round cap of production to 15 rounds, is once production nosedives and is roughly on the level with single stack, then we get to talk about what the future is, because there is a very real market pressure from the consumer of USPSA to shoot a high cap division. And while 15 is not high cap, it's 50% better than 10 rounds. I think that a iron-sighted 9mm division with high-ish capacity cheap guns would be very popular. In fact, I think limited would fall behind production in a heartbeat if that were instituted, because the only people actually playing limited are the people shooting those major guns. So about 48% of the limited activity was from people who are legitimately interested in how limited is supposed to function as a division. So that leaves us with a really interesting place to be, where like the production enthusiasts want to keep it pure, roll back the restrictions to where they were kind of like pre-18 rule book, and keep it a 10-round division. But at the same time, market pressure is kind of coming the other way from people who want to shoot a high cap irons 9 division. And to that point, I did a poll here on my YouTube channel, which I mirrored over on Reddit. And while I'm not a particularly good pollster and don't pretend to be, and the data I have is flawed in all kinds of ways, what it likely indicates is the underlying trend of the opinion, both on the competition subreddit and my channel. The numbers are basically several X, the people who want to increase the capacity of production versus people who want to kind of keep it the same. It's kind of goofy the way I worded it, and I apologize for that. But what is likely true is that there are more casual people who were hitting the button in those polls than there were the diehards who have shot production for years. So that's an interesting crossroads we have to walk towards in the future, considering that they brought up the topic of increasing the round count in production, and in the minutes, it wasn't even brought to a vote. It didn't even receive a motion to be voted on. So that's going to be interesting. I think what's happening is Mike Foley knows that the round count for production needs to be increased for it to be a viable division. And he is just laying out the data so that the case can eventually be made when production is popular as like limited 10. That, hey guys, we used to have this vibrant and robust division. There is a market demand for an irons high-ish cap division. You can look what the 10-round thing got us, and we tried it. It didn't work. Let's try something different. I don't know if it's going to be next year or the year following or 5 years, 10 years in the future, but I do think that it is going to be coming, and I think that Foley is laying the groundwork to make it sort of irrefutably true that 10-round minor-only division is unpopular as a game mechanic, especially when you contrast it with the popularity of carry optics being a high-cap 9mm division. While I personally think red dots are the future and demonstrably better, I do think that there are plenty of people who would still pull the trigger in a 9mm irons division with high-ish capacity guns. But that's what I've got. I'm curious what you think about all the numbers, what you found interesting in the meeting minutes. Let's have a conversation here in the comments. So just shout out in the comments what it is you want to talk about it, and we'll take it from there. I appreciate you guys. YouTube thinks that you will enjoy this video, and I have picked this video for you on recoil management. I appreciate you guys. I'll catch you on the next one.